Success is rarely a matter of luck, and it is almost never merely the result of intense labor. While hard work is the fuel, the engine that drives an individual toward the pinnacle of achievement is their mindset. How incredibly successful people think is fundamentally different from how the average person processes the world. To understand this, we must first recognize that the mind is a filter. We do not see the world as it is. We see the world as we are. The most successful among us have spent years, if not decades, refining that filter to catch opportunities where others see obstacles and to see lessons where others see defeat. This mental framework is not something one is born with. It is an architectural project of the self. The first pillar of this mindset is the absolute rejection of the fixed reality. Most people operate under the assumption that their intelligence, their talents, and their circumstances are static. They believe that they are dealt a hand of cards and must play them as best they can. Successful people, however, operate with a growth mindset that borders on the fanatical. They believe that everything, literally everything, is a skill that can be learned. If they lack the technical prowess to build a company, they don't say, "I'm not a tech person." They say, "I haven't learned this yet." This shift from "I am" to "I can become" is the spark that ignites greatness. It removes the ceiling from their potential. When you believe your capacity is infinite, your effort becomes relentless because you are no longer limited by your current self, but pulled forward by your future self. Furthermore, incredibly successful people have a unique relationship with failure. In the common narrative, failure is the opposite of success. It is a source of shame, a signal to stop, and a bruise to the ego. But in the mind of a high achiever, failure is not the opposite of success. It is a vital component of it. They think of failure as data. When an experiment fails, a scientist doesn't cry. They record the results and adjust the variables. Successful thinkers apply this scientific method to their lives. They move toward failure with a sense of curiosity. They understand that the faster they fail, the faster they learn what doesn't work, which moves them closer to what does. They don't take it personally. To them, a no is just a request for more information or a different approach. They have developed a psychological callosity that allows them to endure the friction of rejection without losing their enthusiasm. This leads to a profound sense of extreme ownership. While the average person looks for someone to blame when things go wrong, the economy, the boss, the upbringing, the incredibly successful person looks inward. They ask, "What did I do to contribute to this outcome, and what can I do to change it?" Even in situations that seem outside of their control, they choose to take responsibility for their response. This isn't about self-flagellation, it's about power. If the problem is out there, you are a victim. If the problem is in here, you are the master of your fate. By taking responsibility for everything in their orbit, they grant themselves the power to fix everything in their orbit. This mindset shifts them from a passive observer of their life to the active architect of their destiny. Another hallmark of the successful mind is the ability to maintain long-term vision in the face of short-term discomfort. We live in a world designed for instant gratification. Most people are thinking about the weekend, the next paycheck, or the next hit of dopamine from social media. Successful people think in decades. They are willing to look foolish for a year to be celebrated for 20. They possess the delayed gratification muscle, which allows them to sacrifice the now for the later. When they face a difficult choice, they don't ask, "What feels good right now?" They ask, "What will the version of me 10 years from now thank me for doing?" This long-form thinking allows them to build foundations that are deep and sturdy. They are not chasing butterflies, they are planting a garden so the butterflies come to them. Beyond vision, there is the concept of unreasonable conviction. To achieve something that has never been done, you must be willing to think thoughts that have never been thought. You must be willing to believe in a reality that does not yet exist. People often call this delusion until it works, at which point they call it genius. Successful people protect their inner conviction from the skepticism of the world. They understand that most people give advice based on their own fears and limitations. Therefore, a high achiever filters out the noise. They listen to experts for data, but they listen to their intuition for direction. They realize that if everyone agreed with their idea, it would likely be too late to be truly revolutionary. They find comfort in the discomfort of being misunderstood. Finally, incredibly successful people think in terms of abundance rather than scarcity. Scarcity thinking says that for me to win, you must lose. It creates a mind filled with envy, comparison, and fear. Abundance thinking says that the more I create, the more value there is for everyone. This mindset allows them to collaborate, to mentor others, and to share their ideas freely. They know that their greatest asset is not a secret formula, but their ability to execute and innovate. They don't compete for a slice of the pie. They are busy baking a bigger pie. This attracts people to them. It builds networks of trust and mutual growth. By thinking big and thinking generously, they create a gravity that pulls resources, talent, and opportunity toward them. This is the alchemy of success. A mind that refuses to be small, refuses to be a victim, and refuses to stop until the vision in the mind becomes the reality of the world. The second dimension of how incredibly successful people think involves their mastery over time and focus. While most people see time as something to be spent or killed, the successful see it as their only non-renewable resource. They think about time with the same intensity that a hedge fund manager thinks about capital. They don't just manage their schedules, they manage their energy. They understand that not all hours are created equal. They recognize that a single hour of deep, uninterrupted work is worth more than 10 hours of distracted multitasking. Successful thinkers have a ruthless no at the center of their lives. They realize that every time they say yes to a trivial request, they are saying no to their ultimate goal. They protect their focus with a ferocity that others find intimidating. But it is this very boundary setting that allows them to produce work of extraordinary quality. This focus is driven by a concept known as essentialism. Instead of trying to do everything, they focus on the vital few versus the trivial many. They identify the one or two things that actually move the needle and ignore the rest. They think in terms of leverage. They ask, what is the one thing I can do such that by doing it, everything else becomes easier or unnecessary? This clarity of thought prevents them from being busy but unproductive. They don't mistake movement for progress. They are like a laser beam concentrated and intense, rather than a flashlight that spreads its light thin and weak. This ability to zoom in on the priority while keeping the big picture in the periphery is a mental gymnastics move that they practice every single day. Furthermore, successful people think about their environment as an extension of their mind. They are hyper-aware of who they spend time with and what information they consume. They understand the law of proximity. You become the average of the thoughts you are most exposed to. If they surround themselves with people who complain, they will eventually find things to complain about. If they surround themselves with people who are solving global problems, they will begin to think on a global scale. They treat their mental diet with more care than their physical diet. They don't let trash into their brain. No gossip, no mindless negativity, no useless drama. They feed their minds with philosophy, biographies of greats, and cutting-edge science. They are perpetual students, always looking for a better mental model to navigate the world. This leads to the first principles thinking made famous by great innovators. Most people think by analogy. They do things because that's how they've always been done or because everyone else is doing it. Incredibly successful people strip a problem down to its fundamental truths and build up from there. They challenge the status quo by asking, why, until they reach the bedrock of reality. This allows them to see through the impossible. If the physics allow it, they believe it can be done, regardless of what the experts or tradition might say. This independence of thought is what allows them to disrupt entire industries. They aren't trying to be 10% better than the competition. They are trying to be 10 times better by rethinking the entire game. In addition to first principles, they possess a high degree of intellectual humility. It sounds like a paradox, but the most confident people are often the most willing to admit they are wrong. They don't marry their ideas, they date them. If a better idea or more accurate data comes along, they are happy to dump the old belief for the new one. To them, being right is less important than finding the truth. They seek out people who disagree with them to find the blind spots in their own logic. They realize that their ego is the greatest enemy of their progress. By detaching their identity from their ideas, they can pivot quickly, adapt to changing markets, and stay ahead of the curve. They are learners first and leaders second. Crucially, successful people think about systems rather than goals. A goal is a singular point in the future. A system is a process that you follow every day. If you only focus on the goal, you are in a state of failure until you reach it, and once you reach it, you lose your direction. If you focus on the system, you win every time you follow the process. Successful people think about how to build a life where success is the inevitable byproduct of their daily habits. They automate their excellence. They don't rely on willpower because they know willpower is a finite resource. Instead, they design their environment and their routines so that doing the right thing is the easiest thing. They think about the long game of consistency over the short burst of intensity. Lastly, in this middle stage of their journey, they think about problems as invitations. When a major crisis hits, the average person asks, "Why is this happening to me?" The successful person asks, "What does this make possible?" They have a mental reflex that flips the script. If a competitor enters the market, they see it as validation of the demand. If a product fails, they see it as a chance to rebuild something better. They operate with an anti-fragile mindset. They don't just survive stress and chaos, they use it to grow. Like a muscle that needs resistance to get stronger, their mind seeks out challenges to expand its capacity. They don't want an easy life, they want the strength to handle a difficult one. This mental resilience is what allows them to stay in the game long after others have packed up and gone home. The final and perhaps most profound aspect of how incredibly successful people think is their relationship with their own mortality and their sense of legacy. As they ascend the mountain of success, their thinking shifts from "what can I get?" to "what can I give?" and "how will I be remembered?" This isn't just altruism, it is a higher level of strategic thinking. They realize that a life lived for oneself is small and ultimately unfulfilling. To achieve truly massive success, one must solve massive problems for a massive number of people. They begin to think about their work as a contribution to the human story. This sense of purpose provides a level of motivation that money or fame never could. When your why is rooted in serving others, your how becomes unstoppable. They also think with a sense of urgency that is often misinterpreted as stress. It isn't stress, it's an awareness that time is the only currency they can't earn back. They live with the constant realization that life is short and the world is vast. This thinking prevents them from procrastinating on their biggest dreams. They don't wait for the perfect time because they know the perfect time is a myth created by the fearful. They operate with a bias for action. They would rather make a decision and correct it later than wait for certainty and do nothing. In their minds, the cost of inaction is always higher than the cost of a mistake. They think of their life as a movie they are directing, and they refuse to let it be a boring one. This bias for action is coupled with a radical curiosity. Even at the height of their careers, they never stop asking, "What if?" They maintain a beginner's mind, looking at the world with the same wonder and openness as a child. They don't let their past successes become a prison of "this is how we've always done it." They are willing to tear down what they built to build something even better. They think about innovation not as a department in a company, but as a way of being. They are constantly looking for connections between disparate fields: art and technology, biology and business, history and future casting. They think laterally, crossing boundaries that others see as walls. Moreover, incredibly successful people think about wealth in a holistic sense. They understand that if you have $1 billion but no health, you are poor. If you have global fame but no deep relationships, you are poor. They think about optimization across all pillars of life: physical vitality, mental clarity, emotional stability, and spiritual groundedness. They treat their bodies like high-performance machines, their minds like sacred temples, and their relationships like gardens that require daily tending. They know that peak performance in business is impossible without peak performance in self. They think about balance not as a 50-50 split, but as a harmony where each part of their life supports the others. They also possess a high-resolution view of their own emotions. While others are swept away by anger, fear, or jealousy, successful people think of their emotions as signals rather than commands. They observe their feelings with a certain level of detachment. If they feel fear, they think, this means I am at the edge of my comfort zone, I should proceed. If they feel jealousy, they think, this shows me something I desire that I haven't yet achieved. Let me learn from this person. They use their emotions as a compass to guide them, rather than a leash to lead them. This emotional intelligence allows them to stay calm in the eye of the storm, making rational decisions while everyone else is panicking. As they reach the top, they also think about leverage through people. They realize that their individual output is capped, but their influence is not. They think about how to empower others, how to build cultures, and how to inspire a collective vision. They don't manage people, they lead them. They think about how to find people who are smarter than them in specific areas and give them the resources to fly. They understand that true power doesn't come from hoarding information or control, but from distributing it. They think about legacy as the fire they light in others that will continue to burn long after their own flame has gone out. In conclusion, the way incredibly successful people think is characterized by a relentless pursuit of growth, an embrace of failure as a teacher, a commitment to extreme ownership, and a focus on essential systems over fleeting goals. They think in first principles, maintain a bias for action, and operate with a sense of abundance and purpose. They are the masters of their internal narrative, choosing to see every obstacle as an opportunity and every day as a chance to contribute to something larger than themselves. This mindset is not a gift, it is a choice. It is a series of choices made every morning when you wake up and every night before you sleep. It is the choice to be disciplined when you feel lazy, to be courageous when you feel afraid, and to be curious when you feel certain. By adopting these patterns of thought, you don't just change what you do, you change who you are, and in doing so, you change the world around you. Success is not a destination you arrive at. It is a way of traveling through the world with your eyes wide open and your mind set on the infinite.